Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restitutor Orbis channel, and we are covering by the Griffith, the symbols of Tartaria. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to all viewers, prime explorers, and all others joining us. We have a lot to talk about. Now, I had been wanting to approach the whole concept of the symbols of Tartaria for some time. There's been a lot of requests that there are certain geographical areas, though, where these symbols apply. And one of the first things I want to start with talking about is the fact that we do have many areas where these symbols may or may not apply. And you might see here in this particular area when we're looking here, whatever town this is, it's just any random town in Europe, whether it's Poland, Germany, or anywhere else for that fact, we oftentimes have this pattern that's repeated, and that pattern is the star fort, the geometrically precise foundation. And then you oftentimes see some sort of hill or ridge in the distant horizon. Now, granted, this is just a drawn picture, so it doesn't really prove anything. And yet we have drawn pictures of all these cities in their infancy. Oddly enough, when you look at drawn pictures, though, of certain cities in the Middle East, whether you're talking about Baghdad, Tehran, or Mashhad, or many of the others, they oftentimes have a circular geometric precision to them. So what's that have to do with symbolism? Well, it has to do with the fact that the layout of the city matters. But can we really prove it? No, not necessarily. You look at later pictures from the medieval time frame or the Middle Ages or whatever you want to call it, and you tend to see that same concept, that same city layout. And so it becomes difficult to really prove anything. And how does this fall into the study of symbolism? Not to be confused with symbology, which is actually the discipline of study of symbols, but you could say both apply in this particular case. Well, it becomes difficult to really know what the origin story was behind a lot of this, especially when we check out some of these cities that were in Europe in World War II. What was the extent of damage? What actual facilities were destroyed? What structures were destroyed? We came across that when we explored Malbork Castle this particular week. So as we go forward, I want to keep that in mind. Now, we start by considering what the symbols were when we look at the symbols of Tartaria. Now, remember that Tartaria is just a placeholder term. It refers to the previous civilization that came before ours. So, yeah, that's a good one. We're all Griffins. Yeah, in a manner of speaking, you could say that we are. And just keep that in mind. Now, I hope you're all doing well as we go into this exploration, because one of the reasons I wanted to keep it more general and not geographically specific is there are geographical specific areas, such as Poland, that does have a lot of official history that's affiliated with the Griffin. Indeed, one of the noble families of Poland had it as their symbol. But I'm going to reserve exploring that until we actually get to Poland, the geographical area. Now, if this exploration goes well and there's a demand for it, we'll certainly explore symbols by geographical areas and consider what the mainstream account says. But I want to start by going back and looking at this federal building in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And you're probably asking, oh, really? And why are we going back to La Crosse, Wisconsin off the Mississippi? What's so significant about that? Well, remember, this is a federal building. So automatically, what's that mean its other designation is? It is a post office, of course. And this goes back to one of the very first, what I like to call the first 6 explorations on the channel, Memory of the Valley, it was called, looking at La Crosse. And of course, they tell us that the interior structure of this particular building was not very well built and that it was inhabited and infested by bats. And that's why they had to tear it down in the 1970s, an all too common story. But you look at other elements of this structure, and you can see that there are the design features of something greater behind it. There also happens to be a lot of symbols that were left, and some survived in the walls. And these are the symbols that we want to look at and initially examine. Now, here's the tragic photo of what remained of the tower as they were tearing it down back in the 1970s, the tail end of that wonderful period of urban renewal. And by the way, if somebody ever wants to suggest that urban renewal is political party specific, I'll remind you that it occurred through multiple political parties being in power in multiple geographies in the United States. So does it really seem to be affiliated with a political party? The answer is no, it happens regardless of who's in charge. So maybe you're just saying it's such a sensible course of action that both political parties have to do it. Fine, so be it. Much like the Federal Reserve and income taxes. They're just so sensible, everybody has to do it. Anyway, staying on topic, there were a lot of remaining symbols to be found from this structure. Now, what are your thoughts looking at this particular symbol and what it may represent? What's it say to you? Ah, yes, egregious griffins. That's a good way to look at it. You know what this reminds me of? Yes, Christie. More frightening, art imitating life. Well, this is true. This actually kind of reminds me of a Mygo from H.P. Lovecraft, one of those horrific creatures. Ooh, good one, Polly. Yeah, red dragon. Anyway, this was on the wall, and it's still a surviving wall of that federal building slash post office in La Crosse. But do you see other symbols in this? And one of the other questions I want you to consider, one of the deeper questions, is what could this potentially represent long term? It's a good question, Chassis. I mean, really, what we could say, and someone mentioned it earlier in the comments, it's the chimera. Ooh, the Demerge. Yeah, it could represent that as well. Hey, brother Adam. Yeah, Medusa. Not really sure about that one, but yeah, I could see Medusa in that one. Reminds me of a star fort on the top far left corner. Oh, good one there, Polly. Absolutely right. Right, all of you. Let's take a look at that. And just in this one little relief on this one particular symbol, you can see all of these different designs. And you get the hint that it is alluding to different things. I mean, are these symbols that represent something else? We have to remember, though, that with symbols, different meanings are assigned by different societies. Now, we can think of one of the most notorious or most famous examples of how symbols can be subverted. Anybody can say that they mean something. Perhaps there was a time when this symbol did not have a very, how shall we say, ominous presence to it. Maybe it meant something else. Maybe it actually represented knowledge or learning or something else entirely. But that's something we always have to keep in mind because it's easy to forget that. Hello, Anna. Thank you for joining us. Well, I appreciate that. Hey, Ishko, good to see you. I suppose the chimera is meant as an amalgamation of desired qualities in a way. Yeah, I would say that it is. And in many ways, it is. But we start by looking at this chimera, this MyGo, whatever you want to think of it as, because it represents the enigmatic nature. Somebody was giving me a hard time because they were asking, why is this word suddenly being bandied about on YouTube? Well, enigmatic was used quite a lot in the 90s and the 70s. I recall hearing it a lot in the 1990s when they were doing all the Nostradamus explorations, when those were the big thing. But, anyways, it's a question that we have to ask. Now, when you see this building in its glory, who knows what symbols were lost when they tore it down? And it looked very pristine in the 1930s, even though a lot of things did not look particularly pristine in the 1930s. You can see it right there. They wrote it 1933. Now, is that the date? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's off a little bit. Not sure. But you can find other reliefs that were lost on this particular structure. And I mean, what's this representing? It's almost like we have a chariot. And I know this isn't the best image. These are the best images I could find, but this is all we have of the record of what was originally on this structure. And remember, this was just a federal building. This was just a post office. But this is what we have, this relief that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And what's really the point behind it? What's it really getting at? I can't even begin to tell you what it's actually alluding to. It's really strange. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what it represents. I mean, do you see a chariot there, or is it just me? I'm not really sure. Oh yeah. Well, reality checkmate. That's what you're never supposed to address either. Is that little phenomenon? So, yeah, I wonder why. Can everybody hear me? Okay. It's kind of one of those odd days. I think we're okay now. All right, good to go. Might just be some locations. There's some odd things going on, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. Like any other day, right? All right. Good to go. Thanks for letting me know. So we'll move on. But I mean, when you look at this, what do you really think you're seeing here? And what is the significance of it? I mean, could we be looking at a relief that's actually telling us the story of what happened in previous civilizations? Oh yeah, I mean, and the quality's not good, and I think that's by design. You cannot find good quality pictures of these reliefs. This is the best I could do. And as I've said on requests, I'm never going to alter any picture. Yeah, sure, I could run some programs on it, but then I'm altering the picture. And who's to say that the program won't alter the picture? And that's always something we have to keep in mind. Now, can I attest to you that this picture wasn't altered by somebody else? No, that's just something we have to keep in mind. But what I can assure you is I am not altering the picture. That's why the study of symbolisms can be a little difficult. And here was the final fate of this federal building, this great post office in La Crosse, because it was inhabited by bats, and they didn't want to put the money into it because we just never have the money. Such is life. Now we go over to Poland and we see something like this. And these are the symbols that are affiliated with that family that was quite into using the griffin. And like I said, we're going to explore that in an upcoming exploration. But I thought I would feature a couple of them as a little bit of a preview. What are your thoughts looking at these particular, well, figures, we'll call them, but there's more than figures on them. There's symbols. And what do these symbols represent on each of these? What do you see when you look at these? Yeah, it does almost have a samurai touch to it, doesn't it, Paulie? That's a great one. And honestly enough, you tend to see it displayed and depicted in many different films. Oh, Vaughn. These have nothing to do with us. And that's kind of a recurring theme that we have. I mean, we have out of place symbols. OOS, out of place, or OOPS, however you want to say it. So many different acronyms. Yeah, and it definitely reflects that referring theme of war, Robert. Ooh, reality checkmate there. Brotherhood of Steel. Yeah, I could see why you'd get those vibes, especially after the exploration this week and the Knights of Tartaria, using the Brotherhood of Steel as an example. But it is rather odd that it doesn't seem to have anything to do with what we'd think of as the official history. I mean, could these just be suits of armor, or are these actual mechanoids of some sort? Someone will say, "You're letting your imagination run wild." Yes, possibly. But you have to open your mind to all these possibilities. Because if we had a long or even a brief period, a break of previous technology, then how would it look to people who had never actually seen the technology function? And believe me, the time frame for that happening is a lot shorter than we like to think. RB, the body language isn't open. Yeah, you're right. It's not, is it? It's closed in a lot of respects. Hey, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Means a lot to me. You're right. You do see the multiple balls. And could that be referring to all the cannons that we see, or at least what we're told are cannons? Could it represent some other technology? Is that what we're seeing right here in this little corner? I mean, yes, you have some more of your classic, what you'd think of as medieval weapons, or at least the time frame that we're told is medieval. You got your swords, your mace, your spear, your morning stars, all the other cool weapons that they innovated to defeat armored knights. But then, of course, you have right here. Is it a griffin? Is it a dragon? No, we all have this legend of dragons from the Middle Ages, but what's that referring to? And so, just looking at these two figures right here, we already have a lot of questions. And that's going to be the recurring theme as we go forward looking at these symbols, because what do they represent? Because they don't seem to represent us. Why do we have a strange science fiction MIGO horror creature on the side of a post office in Wisconsin? Does that really make any sense? Yeah, RB, you might be onto something there. He bought a keg and they wanted to capture that for posterity. Ishko, these could be one of those cases when there's a lot of symbols stacked together, like the power of a kingdom or something. I would say there's a very high probability of that, or maybe somebody was trying to preserve it for some reason. Anyways, so we'll move on from this one, and believe me, we're going to be examining many of these in upcoming explorations. But I haven't really touched Poland yet. And, we first looked at it in the exploration this last week with the Knights of Tartaria, concerning ourselves with the Teutonic Knights. And Poland was where they were operational, according to the official history. But maybe there's an entirely different account behind it. There's certainly a lot of different things to look at there. And I always find this fascinating. This is one of the actual illustrations of the family lineage. Now, imagine having this kind of illustration of your family lineage going back 5, 6, 7, 8 generations. I mean, most of us were lucky if we can get back to the 1800s. I can trace back my family name to the 1400s, but all I really have is a list of names. So does that prove anything? Well, no, it doesn't prove anything to me. But it is rather peculiar when you see this, and it almost seems as though they do have the specific individuals recorded in somewhat individual detail. Now, do you think this was done contemporaneously? In other words, during the time we're told it was done, or was this done after the fact? And if it was done after the fact, then how on earth would they know what people looked like a few generations earlier? I mean, does that make any sense? Those are the kind of questions you have to ask when you're considering this and these accounts on these symbols, if you will. Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, and not many people have seen these kind of graphics, RB, and it's not something that they push so much anymore. I mean, they're out there, and if you search for them, you can find them, but it's not something you're going to see quite as much. Ooh, Tartaria with love. Love the name. Yes, it would appear that they were, but the question is who, and that's the question we're trying to answer. Hey, what's our real story? Thanks for joining us. Good to see you. So, moving on from this rather elaborate and graphically detailed family tree, we have this little image here. Now, we've explored this before. This is from the Kansas City exploration. This is at the base of Liberty Tower, or the World War I monument. And what exactly do you think this figure here is representing? And someone had brought this up on one of the previous explorations. And yes, as you're all coming in, please hit the like button. I appreciate it, and thank you for supporting the channel. But what do you think this figure is representing? Now, of course, I can tell you what we're told it is. There you go. Philippi. Yes, it is officially a sphinx. That's what they say it is. Yes. What exactly does a sphinx have to do with World War I? Were there any great campaigns that were fought in what we think of as Egypt at this time? Why are they using a sphinx? Yeah, I think Jamie's description here is a little bit more on par with what we see, a griffin weeping. And yet, this is what they have at the base of Liberty Tower. These wings that sphinxes didn't have, that it's covering its face with. Atom bomb. Yeah, griffin at rest. I can definitely see that too. A griffin at rest, and that's how its wings would be. But yes, this is what we have with the Liberty Monument. And so it transitions into what is the significance of the griffin, because we don't just see the griffin in Poland. We don't just see the griffin in the middle of the United States. We actually see the griffin everywhere. And there's a lot of different interpretations in terms of what it actually is. Sky Sage, griffin is veiled. Yes. Why would it be veiled? That's a good question in and of itself. Free Soul Hippie, Phoenix Return. Yeah, and there's a lot of connections with many of the bird symbolism that we have that endures. Birds of prey, predator birds, not scavengers, right? Anyways, so keep in mind that significance of the griffin, because that's what we associate and affiliate with the explorations that we do of the previous civilization that on this channel we call Tartaria. What their real name was, who knows? Maybe they were actually called the Griffins, who knows? But anyway, you'll see other interesting symbols like this, and just take this as any generic post office across the United States. But what is really the purpose behind this decorative symbolism? And what do you see right here in the middle of it? I mean, I don't have to point it out to you. Isn't this odd? When you look really closely, I'll just zoom in on it for you. Little better image. But what do you actually see right here in the middle? Lots of shape-shifting going on then. Yeah, no doubt. And you see it in this image. Ooh, Opie right there, dragon killing the snake. Yes. Now, we have seen this before on the channel. In fact, one of the original 8 explorations featured this. Oh, RB, yeah, you figured that out. Family Guy's family is the Griffins. No, I'm sure there's no connection. It's just another coincidence. Yeah, there's probably a connection, so. Yes, dragon killing the snake. Now, where have we seen this before? You're right, Sky Sage. We've seen it on the Mexican flag, absolutely. Although it's an eagle killing the snake, but hey, you know, eagle, griffin, something with wings, it could all be the same thing. I'm thinking of an example from our first exploration on the channel. And it's actually in the exploration of the Iowa State Capitol. Yes, building number 1 on the channel. Right by that banister by the stairs, you can go back and watch that, Palace in the Heartland. And we zoomed in and we saw that, where you actually have these exact same symbols, this dragon and this snake fighting, and they're fighting amongst the bountiful harvest. So what does it really mean? Does it have any meaning? Why is it coming up in U.S. government buildings, official U.S. government buildings, whether it's a post office, a county courthouse, or a state capitol? Well, if we go off the official history, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Or are we just going to accept that in the 1800s, we had an obsession for depicting these medieval fantasy creatures, you know, while we're trying to colonize the entire United States, and we're also dealing with numerous internal problems. We have sickness, we have death, we're trying to build infrastructure, we're running the Iron Horse all the way out to the Pacific. Oh, and by the way, we're subduing the Native Americans, right, wrong, or indifferent. So in the middle of all that, we also have this obsession with putting mythical symbols on our buildings that are still standing today, by the way. And we decided we're going to show dragons, griffins, snakes, and odd things. And let's not forget our pantheon of Greek and Roman deities, because the United States was big into that in the 1800s. Now, I know that's a long diatribe on that, but to really get to the point, there really is no explaining it. And when you look a little bit more closely at this image, you see how things are a little bit more woven into it. It's almost as though it shows this entire epic struggle. And this is just a relief under a post office sign. This is that wall from that post office federal building in La Crosse. And Christie's got it. Not our history. At least not the history that we were taught. Yeah, exactly. The buildings were taken possession of. That seems to be what this reinforces. Now, you don't have to believe that. You can go off the official narrative, and you're certainly welcome here. Hey, Philosopher's Stone, good to see you. Oh, I was told that all I do is I say hi to people. Yeah, I do. I like to talk to people. So, too bad. Anyways, moving on from this particular one, we also have these other reliefs that remain. Now, these ones are a little harder to see. And once again, so that's that relief we just looked at. But what are these other ones displaying and showing? And we can't really see this one too well. But remember, this is in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So what are we showing? This is just really, really strange. I mean, what is going on here? This is really odd, this one on the right. We have a couple cherubs here. We have, it looks to be two female warriors, I would say, one holding a sword. And then we have what appears to be someone or something that's vanquished here. I'm not going to speculate because I can't quite make it out. And no, I can't find a better image of it. But I mean, what's your read on this image here on the right? This is the one that we can make out the most. Sandblasting, yeah. And what kind of material are these reliefs actually made out of? Oh, do those images look out of place? Do they ever? Yeah, no doubt. Ooh, that's a good one, KC933. Yeah, they do look like mermaids, don't they? Ishko, a goddess and a junior goddess after victory over evil. That's an incredible interpretation. See, and this is why I like everybody contributing their ideas, because that's how we get further with it. Yeah, I think that might be onto something. A couple deities, or perhaps a different entire species of human beings, if you will. Or maybe our species, just at a different time in the past. A completely different civilization. Interesting that the letter S looks like a snake. Slimy, slither, sneaky, suspicious. Well, it does come up a lot. And actually, S comes up with a lot of what we would consider derogatory words officially now, RB. So great example. Yeah, Adam, the official account on these is that they were taken off of the original courthouse, and now they survive on this rather, I'll just say it, cheap wall that they threw up in La Crosse. So, gonna have to get a little bit of a look at this. Ooh, Sissy May, Satan being cast out of heaven. Yeah, that's an interpretation too. Absolutely. And who knows what other reliefs that we lost from this structure. I mean, these are the ones that were informed that they saved, and they're still standing to this day. But it's rather peculiar. Now, when you look up at Liberty Tower, we're going back to Kansas City from La Crosse. And yes, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but like I said, I'm not going to be so geographically specific to start this. But when you look up Liberty Tower, it kind of makes sense. This was the great tower that they constructed, over 200 feet tall, in Kansas City, as a monument to those who served in the World War. And if you remember the miniseries, The Day After, well, I guess it really wasn't a miniseries, it was just more of a TV movie, however you want to classify it. They blew this thing to pieces. Jason Robards is walking over it looking for his family after Kansas City was destroyed by not one, but two hydrogen bombs. Anyways, it looks like it could be something that we would construct to honor the dead of World War I. But then you have other images like this. And does anybody remember where this is? And yes, this is an Art Deco building. And we did explore this before too, by the way. I'll give you a hint. This one's in New York. And this is probably my second or third favorite Art Deco building overall. Hey, Anne-Marie, thanks for joining us. It's good to see you. Chrysler Tower. You're not far off, Brian. Oh, look at that. Jedi Red Eye X has it. The Niagara Mohawk Power Building. You are correct. Absolutely correct. Oh, you're not far off, Petty. Yeah, the Chrysler Building's a good one, too. But this is the Niagara Mohawk Building. All about electricity and power. And what's this figure supposed to represent? Is this the super proto-man who was around in the United States in the 1930s? Is this the god of power? Why is anybody putting something like this in an Art Deco building that was built in the 1930s in New York? I mean, there's a little bit of a very futuristic element to it. A lot of it doesn't make any sense. What exactly does it symbolize? And yet, pay attention to the helmet and the head, because you'll notice that we'll see this again on other figures, and not figures that are made out of what we think is metal, but who knows what this is really made out of. You know how I am. Unless I can actually get up there and interface with it, I have no idea what it is. Oh yeah, we'll just tell you it's some kind of cheap steel or some sort of cheap stainless steel. But, you know, this is coming up on 100 years old, and this is still standing to this day, and it still looks this pristine. Well, you know, we have to renovate it all the time, and the usual answers that we get. But what the heck could this possibly represent? Sky Sage, Choron. Yeah, that's probably about as good of a guess as any. Yeah, I mean, you know, in America, who knows? A winged warrior angel. Yeah, and that's something else that we see a lot. Ah, yes, William. Definitely not cheap. Very expensive. Because nobody's doing it today. No one's even trying to replicate it today. Are they? Hey, Head Honcho Rocks. Yeah, Megatron. And Charles, a samurai. Yeah, why not? Some sort of advanced electric samurai. Inferno, Flash Gordon. Yes, maybe it was the motivation, the inspiration for the Flash Gordon stories. Lady D, I feel like Art Deco was the last of the architects who knew how to build in the old way. Maybe, or maybe it was the actual pinnacle of the previous civilization. You know, who knows for sure. But this is another one of those that I always found very interesting, you know, and what does this symbol really mean? We have no idea. It does not fit into what we're told historically about anything in New York. You know, it's not affiliated with any sort of warrior. This is not an American soldier from World War I. This is not an American soldier from the Civil War. This is not a member of the New York militia. And this is not a member of one of the work people who constructed the Erie Canal or this building. None of this makes any sense. So from a symbol perspective, symbolism or symbology, by the way, did I happen to tell you I'm an expert in namiology? Little joke there. But anyways, how does this fit in to anything that we're told historically? It doesn't. It's an anomaly. It's a contradiction. And you come across a lot of these. And this is one of the most egregious examples. Now, in this particular family coat of arms, there has been a significant change. Now, we're kind of switching gears a little bit into heraldry. And does anybody know what heraldry is? Heraldry being the symbolism, the symbols that represented families of the Middle Ages officially. When Europe officially, again, going off the historical account, I'll try to stop using that word, began using symbols to represent families and family names. Now, there is a repeated account of many families that had to change their symbols from griffins to lions, because if you look at this particular family coat of arms, you can see that's what's clearly happened here. That what they originally had for griffins were changed to lions. Now, there's many other alterations. And you can probably guess that, of course, this is an Irish coat of arms, because for some unknown reason, it really seemed to happen to Irish coats of arms quite frequently, that they were vastly altered from what their original intention was. And, you know, with family crests, Kathy, are these the original family crests, or have they been changed? Have the coats of arms been changed? Yeah, I mean, Free Soul Hippie's right. You still see the dragon. They didn't take that away. But it's as though they're trying to alter it to conceal it in some way, shape, or form. Hey, New West Reset, thanks for joining us and welcome. Hey, Saxon Ranger, Welsh flag is a cool dragon. Yeah, and a lot of the Scottish symbols, the Scottish coats of arms, have been altered as well. Now, there's a statement that the reason that this was done officially was because the church did not approve of the griffin. The griffin was a dragon. It was the devil creature. So therefore, you had to use the lion. That was more acceptable. We won't say anything about any of the other bizarre symbolism that we see on this particular coat of arms for a family from Ireland. because it's already deep enough with the alteration of the Griffins. Maybe another time, but you can see it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, if I saw this and someone said, yes, this is the coat of arms from a family from Ireland, I'd say, are you out of your mind? It doesn't look anything like a family from Ireland, but you know. Now, to switch gears over to this, the reason I wanted to show this, because when you look at the maps and the depictions of certain cities, this being Madison, Wisconsin, you'll find that there's these images that are supposed to be idealized images. Now, there was never any account of this giant obelisk or this light tower, whatever the heck this is, being in Madison, Wisconsin. The layout of this terrain doesn't match Madison, Wisconsin. And what am I getting at here? Anybody can draw anything. Is it possible, though, that this could have represented what somebody actually saw and is very detailed? The answer is yes, but it's also just as possible it could be someone's entire imagination and someone was just putting together an idealized image to sell Madison, Wisconsin to people who were coming there. And yes, I'm well aware of that. And that's why it's very difficult to come to final conclusions and why we have to keep open minds. And so I just show this because as we go to these symbols, it is easy to go down that path of going a little too far and thinking you have the answer right away. And the reality is we don't. Because when you go back to this family coat of arms, well, when you see these alterations that official history says happened, is there another reason? Is the griffin really this evil depiction, this evil symbol? Is any symbol that we look at mean what they tell us it means? Or does it depend what time we're asking the question? That's always important. So going back to the original symbol that we looked at out of the old lacrosse federal building and post office, is it possible that this might have a more benign intent then? Perhaps it meant something completely different. And it's one of the reasons that I'm always cautious when we're looking at things like snakes and all the depictions of snakes being evil or affiliated with evil. Well, there's an entirely different perception that says they were affiliated with wisdom, that they were affiliated with learning. Both can be true at the same time, because when you have different civilizations, different previous eras, there could have been other meanings that were affiliated with them. And who knows what meanings are being affiliated with these by our current civilization. In reality, they seem to want us to completely forget that these existed. I mean, they're still up. So are they still hung up as trophies? I mean, what are your thoughts? There you go, reality checkmate. Yeah, they sure do. Yeah, you're right, Vaughn. And you know what? I do too. And pretty much anybody I talk to. And it seems as though symbols are very useful for that. And thank you for that, New West Reset. Thank you for the memberships and welcome to the new members. I really appreciate that. But it really alludes to what is the significance of the griffin. What's it really showing us? Well, is history now told by the victors or is it told by the same group of people? You know, that's the question. Albie, creature from Mordor. Yes. And that's something else we have to ask. Is it to keep us intentionally confused? So we have to keep an open mind about the symbols. And starting with this basic one that we looked at, this original one, you know, does it represent an ominous evil deity or does it represent knowledge, learning, and truth? It's hard to say. And of course, you look at the original depiction of the griffin, and this is the one from Poland, and you can see that it has the same elements that we saw in the figures that were converted to lions. It's in the same position. And so what does it really mean? We don't know what it originally meant. We certainly know what the other meanings are for it. And then even seeing how these griffins were turned into lions, at least officially lions, but you can see they still look quite a bit alike. Now, of course, this is more of a generated image because, you know, you're looking on a computer screen. I can't actually pull out and show you the original family crest. Believe me, I would if I could. But that's why I always encourage you to go on site and look at things yourself, because then we can really interact with things. And you can actually interact with this symbol still if you go to La Crosse, Wisconsin. But you don't have to go that far if it's far for you. You can go anywhere, your local courthouse or whatever local government buildings you have wherever you are in the land, and interface with these symbols. Now, the last image we'll look at before we go to our first exploration of the griffin in more detail, these are what are called the Tower Guardians, and this is at the top of that particular tower in Kansas City. What do these Tower Guardians have to do with World War I veterans? And what do they look like? Are we seeing a little bit of a resemblance with that figure we saw earlier here? What do you think? Now, yeah, I probably should have done a better job of lining up these images, but that's okay. I'm not perfect. But do you think that those tower guardians look a lot like that figure that we have on the Niagara Mohawk building? Is there a connection? Oh, you're right, Sky Sage, Roman gods. I mean, we may as well go there because that is what they look like. And thank you for that, Anne Marie. I really appreciate that. And so, what does this have to do with what we're seeing? Ah, Maynard threat, duality. Yes, we definitely have a thing for duality in our current civilization, don't we? Duality about everything. You're probably right, Vaughn, and that's the real answer at the end of the day. We don't remember, so we don't know. We only know that we see symbols that look similar for some unknown reason. Brian, I believe it's trying to represent the authorities there to protect the memorial. Yeah, it could be. Could be. Yeah, but is it Statue of Liberty themed? I mean, if you look closely at the face of the Statue of Liberty, I mean, yes, you might think they're hats, but are they? And do the faces look the same as the Statue of Liberty, or do they look a little different? I mean, I'll leave it to you. I'm not going to tell you what to think on that count. But remember, this is a memorial that was built to honor the veterans of World War I, not just the American veterans, but all the veterans of World War I, at least from the Allied side officially, because the generals were all present, according to official history, to dedicate this impressive monument. It's definitely one of those things in Kansas City that's worthwhile to see, the World War I monument, and you're also right next to the Union Station. So it's all within walking distance. And I haven't talked about the other building there yet, which somebody reminded me of, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to it. But if you really step back and you look and you see the similarities, we can actually find figures that are similar. And perhaps that's what we should be looking for first. Where do we see these symbols? That's the place where we can start. If we have no history, if we've completely forgotten it, if nobody has any written record anywhere, which it's very likely they don't, not the accurate written record, then that's where we have to start. We have to go and make those comparisons and see where the symbols are similar and in places where it doesn't make sense. And then compare that with the official historical account. Yes. Halo's mind controlling. That's right, Sky Sage. And Kathy's right. We do see these symbols everywhere. They're far more common than you can ever begin to imagine. Here for now, the watchers. Yeah, why not? Brendan, wisdom is an afterthought. Yeah, it would seem so, but it doesn't have to be. William, Rome was worldwide. Yeah. Was it Rome, or is that just what they tell us it is? Hello, Nikki. Reminds me of Little Rock High School. Yeah, it actually reminds me of a lot of high schools because you'll see things like this at many different high schools. Hey, Isabella, thanks for joining us and welcome. And so with that, we look at what is the significance of all these symbols. The significance is we have to look and see where they are. And if they're everywhere, then that is evidence that they represent a civilization that was everywhere. Now, whether you want to say that's Rome or more or whatever, you know, they've got many different names for these worldwide civilizations. Who knows for sure? But starting with the symbols and understanding where they are and what they can mean, that's where it all begins. Now, with that, we're about 40 minutes in, and wow, did time just fly by right there. So we'll go ahead and take our first 2-minute break. And when we come back, I'm going to show you one of the most impressive Griffin buildings in the land. So please stand by for that. But before we go on break, thank you everybody for joining us. Hit that like button. We'll be back in exactly 2 minutes, and I've got some nice Monty Python music for you. And we're going to explore Griffin Central, a building that has an unbelievable amount of griffins in it. So we'll see you in 2 minutes. Okay, we are back. Give everybody a chance to get logged back on. And I get the feeling some of you who've been with the channel for a while can probably guess what the Griffin building actually is. I got to say, some of these comments when we go on break are hilarious. I love going back and reading them. So I look forward to doing that again. Anyway, let's get up our images here. And does anybody know what we're actually going to be looking at? Does anybody have any idea what the Griffin building actually is? I bet somebody out there knows. And here we go. A dam. Come on, Polly. Would I really get you built up for a dam? Give me a little bit more credit than that. No, Marine, you're just in time. You made it for the Griffin building. Good time here. And this is it, the Griffin building. Does anybody know what this building is? Vaughn, Mayo. Yes, the Mayo Clinic. Officially, this is the Plummer Building in Rochester, Minnesota. Yes, that's right. The Griffin Building, one of the most impressive Art Deco buildings in the land, is in Rochester, Minnesota. Now, in this postcard picture, it doesn't look that impressive, does it? But when you look at some black and white imagery of the 1930s, and the official history says this thing was built in the 1920s. Yes, in Rochester, Minnesota. Remember, they didn't have I-90 going through there yet, the main interstate. So quite an impressive achievement for the 1920s. And of course, when you look in the background story of Mayo Clinic, it's quite intriguing. You had a town that was in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota, southeast Minnesota to be specific, hit by a tornado, and those great Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi and a gentleman by the name of Mayo from England decided to build a hospital. And so they built a hospital in 1889. And then his sons, one who was a very able administrator, teamed up with some other medical professionals, and voila, they built the Mayo Clinic. And there you go. There's the story of the Mayo Clinic in a very short amount of time. Oh, believe me, Ryan, there are multiple buildings that disappeared and were replaced, including that hospital. Yes, Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Yeah, right. Nothing new under the sun, true enough. So let's take a closer look. Well, funny you say that, Anne, because it was actually built by a guy named Henry Plummer, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I'm shooting. Was it Henry Plummer or was it another plumber? Hold on. I know I've got this. Yeah, here he is, Plummer right here. And, he was one of those doctors who was an architect in his spare time because, apparently being a doctor is an easy thing to do. And being an architect and a doctor is even easier, especially in the early 1900s. And you can thank this particular individual for actually giving you the current medical system because he's the one who laid out the bureaucracy behind it, at least officially. Anyways, so why is the Plummer Building so impressive? Why are we so intrigued with it? And oh, yes, I'm making a significant mistake. Yeah, it was Henry Stanley Plummer. So I wasn't wrong. Woohoo! Once in a while, my memory works still. So here's an image of it from circa 1930s. And what are your thoughts of this? Albie, mayonnaise is good with chicken. And now every time I see the movie An Officer and a Gentleman and they talk about Zach Mayo portrayed by Richard Gere, I can't help but see the Mayo Clinic and the Plummer Building. So Anyway, so Henry Plummer being a certified genius and another one of those polymaths. And you can see here that this is taken from Broadway. Today, this is Highway 69, apparently. So right would be north, and then we're looking west at the Plummer Building. Look at some of these other structures. Rochester, Minnesota in the 1930s, and look what you have here. I mean, none of these structures here are slouches. Got a couple columns here. And then over it, you have the gigantic Plummer Building. Now, granted, we haven't seen it in color yet. Don't worry. It won't disappoint. And here's your first image of the tower in color. Now, you might notice this is a more contemporary photo, and the Mayo Clinic, having grown because of, all the wonderful medical practices and having the reputation of being the best medical clinic in the land, make of that what you will, they have money. And with money, they've built other structures. Of course, the structures that surround the Plummer Building, but in my humble opinion, don't compare to it, at least artistically. And when you look at the Plumber building, especially the tower, you'll see 4 griffins, 4 gigantic griffins. We'll take a better look at them. Other griffins up here on the tower. We'll take a better look at that. And then other figures and columns that are this high in the 1920s. And this building is just filled with very interesting symbols. And I have a question for you all. What exactly does a griffin have to do with healthcare? Yeah, it's about as old world as it gets, Pat. Absolutely right. Well, you know what's interesting about this one, Sky Sage, is this building looks different depending on the light that they put on it. So it's very, very intriguing. RB, did I hear that you're in Iowa? Well, if you are, you're not too far from this. Yeah, exactly. It's a guardian. Yeah, it might well be. It might well be. Here's another image of it. Not exactly the best picture, but that's okay. I've got some better ones. And here we go. Much better detailed image. And so here you can see these griffins on either side. And these are very clearly griffins. They have shields in front of them. You also have some other creatures lined up front here. But then what exactly are these figures, these human figures? Remember, this is the 1920s. What are these supposed to represent? Are these supposed to represent doctors from the Middle Ages? And for that fact, why do we have a griffin representing what was supposed to be the premier building, the headquarters building of the Mayo Clinic, because this was the only building they had in the 1920s? Why are they throwing griffins on it? What does it really mean? And the construction materials behind this building are something extraordinary. Now, by the griffin here, we get a little bit of a preview of a symbol we're going to look at after the cartouche. But right now, we're focused on griffins. And believe me, this structure is loaded with griffins. Griffins here, griffins there, griffins everywhere. Hey, Space Fraggle. Ooh, reptiles are often used as a symbol of regeneration. So true. Hey, I love that picture you got there. Commander Krug. Nice picture. Christopher Lloyd at his finest. Paulie, this building had to be a source of power of some sort, and the griffins may symbolize its source. Entirely possible. Kathy, they put griffins on the buildings. Yeah, just for fun. Why not? Sissy May, overseer. Yeah, that could be. All possibilities. Cartouche. Yeah, thanks, Julia. Anyways, so this is just the exterior of this particular building. Now, here's a better image where you're actually looking right up at the griffin. And you can see there is a lot of impressive detail within this. Now, keep in mind that this is at the highest level, so nobody from the ground can see this detail. But if you're higher, you're going to see this detail. Again, in the 1920s, in Rochester, Minnesota. And at that time, Rochester, Minnesota was not the large city that it is today. Notice I didn't say large shitty, although some people might think of it as becoming a large shitty, but it was a large city. Anyways, what do these figures represent up here? I know I keep asking that question. And then you can see the other creatures that are by the griffin here. And what do they represent? And again, going to ask the official question, what does this have to do with a medical clinic? Yeah. Well, you know, Sky Sage, logistics were easy until about World War II, when the United States pulled off some incredible logistical miracles, but then afterwards, suddenly logistics were hard, even though they built the interstate system. So don't ask me. I don't know. Ooh, Black Panther. What if the griffin were mechanical, like a suit? That's an interesting premise. You might be onto something with that. That's a very interesting premise. Thanks for sharing that. Could be. Very well could be. Paulie, they look like pilots. Maybe it was another source of powering the blimps and planes. Yeah, that could be. You know, and if you're docking up there, then you're going to see something artistically impressive and beautiful. Ishko with a griff here and a griff there, here a griff everywhere, a griff. Yeah, it feels that way. Now, as impressive as this building is on the exterior, wait until we see the interior. And we look a little closer and we can kind of see some detail here on the front of this griffin, although it's kind of hard to make it out. I could see where you could have the impression of that being a mechanoid suit. I can definitely see that. That's a very intriguing premise. And then, of course, you have the columns that are so well decorated, several stories up, and it looks like they've got several griffins all around them, because why wouldn't they? But as impressive as this structure is on the exterior, the interior is somehow even more impressive. And officially, this is an Art Deco building. And for those of you who aren't aware of it, this is what I consider one of the most beautiful Art Deco buildings in the land. It might not be the largest, but when you see the interior. Now, you go into this gigantic door to get there, and this is what was featured in the opening video of this particular exploration. And about the only thing on it that lines up to this being the Mayo Clinic is it seems like they added the words Mayo Clinic. I don't know, maybe they didn't, but it's really odd that it seems very out of place there. But, they could have, and it could be the official history, but there are so many elements of this building that really stand out. Speaking of, Henry Plummer also had a little relief added with his face on it. We'll look at it, and you'll see how it compares to the rest of these reliefs. So on the exterior of this building, you have all these very impressive reliefs, which are very detailed and very incredible. And they depict men, women, gods, goddesses, however you want to interpret it. Now, the interesting thing here is above the main door, you also have these little figures where it's almost like they have fighting knights here. And officially, they say these doors were made out of brass, although being there, I think it's something much more substantial. Whether you want to think of it as some sort of advanced metal or some sort of advanced polymer or some sort of alchemical produced substance. I mean, any one of those are good answers because this building looks like it's going to be there pristine for the next who knows how many thousands of years unless it gets instantly vaporized. Something tells me it's not going to be susceptible to fire. I don't know why I know that, but and here's a little plaque just so you're not confused about it. So yeah, maybe they built it in the 1920s, logistically impossible and all. And here's a little bit better look at the main entryway. And so we can see these figures. Yeah, what exactly do any of these figures have anything to do with health, doctors, or anything in the United States for that fact? Remember, we're in the Midwest United States. We're not even on the East or West Coast in the 1920s. Any ideas? I'm open here. What do you think? Minerva. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, it does look like Minerva, doesn't it? Atom bomb. Stone fires are quite popular. Yes. Well, I think there's another reason why we know this structure is never going to go away. It has absorbed nothing to do with us. They built the courthouse in the 1920s, not these structures. Yeah, possible. Oh, that's a good one, RB. You need a whole room full of deities to care for you. That's a good one. Yeah. Why don't they just say that? Yeah, good point here. Where are the doctors at? They're not shown on this at all. And then some of these other symbols right around it. I mean, what's this have to do with it? No idea. And I mean, you can go up to it and you can actually touch these pillars that are integrated into the walls, and you can see these very impressive reliefs. Oh, look, there's another griffin, kind of looking like the mechanoid suit right there. And then up here, a cross, a very decorated one with these flowers of life around it. Now, it's just something I'm saying. And then you have this very interesting figure bearing two torches. Looks like a woman. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just seeing that. Another figure. And another griffin. So yeah, you see why this becomes Griffin Central. Now, this is the interior. What are your thoughts on the interior of this structure? Yeah, it does kind of look like a tie. It's like the cravat that the third Doctor wore in Doctor Who. Ah, yes, Tartaria with love. Yeah, this is really where you see it. Yeah, and just when you thought you saw everything with the exterior of this structure, yeah, there you go, Sooner West. Yeah, that's what you and I are seeing, buffing for weeks. And yet, when you talk to people who work there and work in the building, they never buff. Yeah, I mean, palace, beautiful, gaslighting at its finest. That's a good way to put it there, KC933. And this is really where, when you take the interior and the exterior of the structure, this is why I say this is one of the most impressive structures in the land. I think this is one of the most impressive Art Deco, or at least designated Art Deco structures. Water the Tree 76 says not built in the 1920s. Yeah, at least not what we think of as the 1920s. Now, accessing this structure can be extremely difficult. This is one of the other floors. I think this is the third or the fourth floor. And yet you can also see, though, the detailing within the ceiling and all these little figures here. And again, another very impressive floor. And it just keeps going like this all the way up to the top. Now, what do these symbols actually mean here? No idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, the 8-pointed star. Okay, it's time to start your theories about Aurelian's icon, even though I've explained it, right? Now, even in the banister, as if you didn't see enough griffins, there are griffins all over the banister within the structure. So now you see why I call this the Griffin building. I didn't count how many griffins there were on the outside, and I couldn't imagine counting the griffins on the inside. But so many griffins all over this particular building. Oh, now I'm Canadian. Well, I actually kind of consider that a compliment, but ooh, Fleshborg. I thought it was the owl. Well, funny you mentioned that. Be patient. Just be patient. We'll get to it. Because guess what? We do have owls in this building too. Very beautiful golden owls that appear everywhere in the structure. And so, yes, alternative researchers will tell you that the owl and the griffin appears a lot as the symbol of the previous civilization, or affiliated with the civilization that we refer to as Tartaria. No, not Greater Tartaria that was limited to what's East Asia, although it may well have been there, and maybe that was the last remnant of it, who knows for sure. But yes, there are owls all over the interior of the structure, in addition to the many griffins. So now what you have here is one building that has owls and griffins and all this other unbelievable beauty within it. Ooh, on the floor it only had 7. Why did it only have 7? I wonder. Good one, Sky Sage. Owl B. Oh, the owl, the naga, the snake. What's our real story? There is much about owls in ancient societies. Yes, and you might recall it kind of reminds me of Boo Boo the Owl from my favorite film, or one of my favorite films, Clash of the Titans. Of course, I'm referring to the original Clash of the Titans. What else would I be referring to? Oh, what's this? After the Triple Wake. Owl for the people, griffins for the army? Well, and that's another question. Did they actually use flags? Who would bother with flags if you had this? So, oh, you're absolutely right, Chassis. Athena was associated with an owl. That's who Boo Boo was constructed after, was her owl, Boo Boo, the white owl that you see Susan Fleetwood holding very magnificently in that film. Yeah, the remake didn't have anything with deities, did it? Just had a brief appearance by Liam Neeson. Anyways, not going to get down with that. But even the elevator doors, you can see all kinds of interesting symbols here. Now, are these griffins? Are these different creatures? Are these chimeras? Are these mechanoid suits? Who knows? Who knows for sure, but you do see it. This is an elevator door, by the way. Oh, look, more griffins right here. On a tree. Yes, this was constructed for the Mayo Medical Clinic in the 1920s. Sure. It's very well documented. Sure. And then even these figures here. I mean, here it almost looks like you have a Valkyrie. And then this individual of wisdom. And then what are these other symbols? So just so many here in this one structure. We're looking at one building in the middle of Minnesota. Oh, Polly. Yeah, those cannonballs. I mean, who knows what they really are? Oh, yes, RB. And so you can see why Phoenix, Griffins, Owls all in one single building. Very, very impressive, isn't it? And why I think it's one of the most impressive structures. Now, here's a better image showing you those figures on that elevator door. And yeah, once again, I mean, we kind of see everything represented here. And again, how exactly do you reconcile what's depicted on this image with the standards of the time in the late 1920s? I guess we could say that the flapper era had really pushed things. Maybe it really pushed things. But of course, when we see these same images from other times, like the 1870s, the 1890s, it doesn't really line up, does it? But here it is for all to see. And again, if you look in the details, you've got the same interesting thing going on. And remember, this is an elevator door made of what I'm not sure. We'll be told it's a cheap bronze, but yeah, sure. Whatever you say. Oh, Victor Black. Yeah, Virgo. That's a good one. Kathy. Phoenix, Griffins, and Owls. Yep. Ah, yes. Well, and you know what, Polly? Maybe that's an example of that's what we're told to associate it with, the fertility goddess, but maybe it meant something else entirely. Hey, Marine. Yeah, the tarot cards. And maybe there's a reason why there's certain images put on those and why there's a certain affiliation today with tarot cards. Yeah, good point there, Sooner West. I mean, who crafted all this? Who did all this? I mean, there's no record of that. Just the Henry Plummer guy who designed it all himself. Now, you can see the exterior of the building. This is what it looks like today next to the one of the more modern buildings at the Mayo Clinic. But the beauty is you can still go there in Rochester and you can still see the structure. You may be able to go inside. You probably won't be able to go inside, but you can still get close to it and interface with it. Ah, yes. And what does this represent here? Very interesting looking individual. With is that supposed to be a telescope or is it something else? Hmm. Maybe it's a tower. I don't know. Very, very odd. And what about the rest of these symbols here? Were they added later or were they part of the original relief? See, those are the other problems that we have because who knows how long the structure's been here? Who knows who has done what to it? Now, this is something that was very clearly added. I mean, it looks like it was added, and officially it was added. This is Henry Plummer, the doctor slash architect, master polymath, designing the building, apparently. And they even replicated one of the owls that are all over the place on the inside. Now, let me ask you, does this relief look like it matches the quality of any of the other reliefs we've seen, interior or exterior? What are your thoughts? Ah, yes. Atom bomb, modern. Yes, it looks very modern, doesn't it? Yes, RB, it really stands out. And it's not like they weren't even trying. It's like they thought this is all we have to do. Here's Henry Plummer. Here's him actually designing it. We throw this on the side of the building. Maybe they removed one of the blocks, or maybe they chiseled it off, or took all their time. Yeah, comical is exactly right, Kathy. TL Spud looks very 50s. Yeah, I'd agree with that. The silent owl is the nod. Yeah, and isn't it interesting how even the owl doesn't even compare to anything you see? But anyway, Jamie, yes, dodgy, as you say down there in Australia. It's dodgy. Yeah, it's quite dodgy, isn't it? So that is the Griffin building in its entirety. And so if you ever find yourself in or around Rochester at the Mayo Clinic, hopefully you're just visiting, I strongly advise you see the Griffin building. You'll find all the symbols and more you can imagine just on the exterior. Although it should be noted they're all over the interior. Although, like I said, accessing it is a matter of some challenge. All right, let's look at some other symbols of Tartaria or the previous civilization. And we're going to take a look at the infamous or famous cartouche symbol. Now, why is it called a cartouche? Because apparently that's what they tell us it's called. Although typically we affiliate cartouche with Egyptian hieroglyphics, interesting enough. And here you are. Now, have we seen this symbol in many of our explorations? Thoughts? Yeah, you're right, David. Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me again. Just tell me what to think, right? Julius looks like he's got plans for a Mormon temple. Yeah, maybe that's what they were thinking they could pull off, right? Oh boy. Ah, Black Panther, the missing center relief. Yes. They had faces on them. Absolutely. And so we've come across this, and this is the symbol you will see everywhere. Official architectural history will tell you that this is merely a cartouche. That's what it's called. Oh, yeah, look at this nice face on it. The lion face. So, does this really look like a lion? Well, I don't know. Maybe. A couple cherub figures. But there's many different variations of it. And again, a lot of times you'll see that they're blank. Now, what do they represent in reality? We don't know. Do they represent a portal? Do they represent something else? Was there some sort of symbol within them? And of course, you always have, the same symbol that we just saw in the Plumber building. Now, what's this represent? Is it a flower? Is it a leaf? Is it something else? Your imagination could do all kinds of things. But again, it's the cartouche. It was very popular on buildings from the 16 to the 1900s because apparently doing things like this was very easy. Yes, here we have a couple angels. Now, this one does actually have a symbol in it. Oh, look at that. We got the old snake eating the tail. The Ouroboros. Beware the Ouroboros. This is a rather sinister looking Ouroboros, isn't it? This one's relatively intact. It's one of the few ones we see intact. Now, do we have lions or do we have griffins? I guess you could say they look more like lions here. But again, certain symbols that repeat all the time. And even looking at the fine details on this. Now, we're not so concerned where these are right now because these could be anywhere. We could be in the United Kingdom. We could be in Italy. We could be in the United States. We could be in Australia. We could be in Africa, for Pete's sake. Yeah, they're there too. And Japan and China. Yeah, you'll see examples like this when we get there. I'm not making this up. I wish I were. Believe me. Oh, looks Greek. Yeah, I could see that. Oh, well, if I am fake, then I'm pretty interactive. I'm a very good program. What are you doing, William? Why are you questioning me? Oh, Heidi, Supper Club in Wisconsin. You're not talking about the Ishnala, are you? That's a beauty. Hey, Kat, good to see you. And thanks for joining us. But anyway, with these cartouches, you'll see everything, many different variations. Now, even this is considered a cartouche. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is this that 8-pointed star again? Yeah, this is another one of those that comes up a lot. It just happened to be fortuitous coincidence, though, that the symbol that my students drew for me happened to have 8 points on it. Now, this is considered another relief from Roman Greco times, although oddly enough, you'll find similar figures like this all over the place. Again, in places where they probably shouldn't be, like U.S. state capitals built in the 1800s, county courthouses built in the 1800s, even many built in the early 1900s. Cherubs and deities and other cornucopias. Yeah, don't forget about cornucopia from Fruit of the Loom, right? Sorry, I just had to go there. Now, this is probably the most common of these cartouches that we see, where it clearly looks like something is missing, as though something's been removed from it. Or maybe something was removed from it and it was left that way intentional. Not really sure. But again, this is something else that you'll see all over the place. The 3 pillars. Yes, you're right, Vaughn. Honey of the gods. Yeah, reality check, mate. It could be a face. It could be something else. An Ouroboros, maybe? Very, very odd, isn't it? Literal food chain, no doubt about it. Ooh, nose is broken. Yes, Sun Tzu, you're right. You do see that a lot. Anyways. Now, here's one of the other ones, and here it looks like they added something in it. Now, it's really hard to make out some of these and try to determine what's authentic and what's not. Was this the authentic symbol, or was this something that was added later? That's always a possibility. Hard to say. But the cartouche is just as present as the griffin, and here's probably one of the most famous graphic representations, one of the drawings from it. And here's where you'll actually make out the devices. So you got the face, You've got the surrounding outer seashell look. I mean, I'm just calling that. Maybe, you want to think of it as something else entirely. I'm trying not to come up with words or descriptions too ominous because, yes, this cartouche can become very ominous very quickly. That's the interesting thing about it. It can be an object of beauty, and yet it can be an object of terror and suffering, depending on one's perception. So maybe I should just show it to you and let you come to your own conclusions. Aurelian's yapping too much. The AI is malfunctioning. What's our real story? The rounded out ones. I wonder if they plastered over a face. Yeah, and they tend to be convex. You're right. In other words, they're protruding. So yeah, it's one of those things that you see a lot. And what's it really representing? We don't know. But you do see this cartouche everywhere, all over the land. And here's one of the ones from China. Even the same designs. Now, we'll get to it when we do our explorations in China. And yes, we're coming up to that. It'll be early next year. Believe me, I got a load of content to get through before then, but no problem. We'll get through it and we'll get there. But it is interesting to think of this. Now you're saying, oh, it's just a drawn sketch. It doesn't prove anything. Well, wait till we look at them. And don't worry, I'll reference what we're looking at now, just in case anybody forgot. And here's probably one of the more rudimentary ones on a little bit of a fireplace. But again, you still see the baseline of the cartouche. It looks like we got a couple, I don't know, bearded figures, strange figures on either side. But it's a lot more common again than we realize. And what's it reflecting? KC933. Looks like the cave Aladdin escaped from. Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's exactly what it is for all we know. RB. Looks like a moon green man. Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Brother Adam. Portals. That's what I am under the impression that it represents. That the cartouche represents portals. But again, could be completely wrong on that. As you're fond of saying, Brother Adam, and as I'm fond of saying, all I know is I don't know, and I certainly don't know about this one. And who knows what was covered up with this. What we don't know. Now here on this particular cartouche, it looks like it had a lion, or it added a lion. But remember that lion's in the same griffin position. We have the face of suffering here. And the face here, maybe it's more of a human face, but who knows for sure. So there's many different variations of this. Many different variations at different times. And yet there's some very, very elaborate ones. And clearly, was this added later? Maybe. Don't know for sure. But yet you can also see the repeated symbols, the repeated patterns. So whether, again, we're in Italy, in one of the most beautiful churches in the land, as we're informed, or we're in a medical clinic in Minnesota, you see the same symbols. Oh, and by the way, you also see these at many universities across the land too, inside and outside. So why is there so much commonality? Yeah. The Southern Oracle, that's a good one, KC933. Oh, Sky Sage. Yeah, it is very gaudy, isn't it? Seen the cartouche on Hotels of Old Bankers. Oh, yeah. They're quite prominently featured there. Oh, there you go, Polly. Yes, often repeated in countries who were staunch rivals. Just like the United States and Russia, both having orders of St. George. And somebody remarked about that George is slaying the dragon. Is that supposed to be a representation of the griffin? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's representing something else. We just don't know. Now, this is what I would have expected to see on the Plummer building. The cartouche with the classic medical symbol on it, but none of these are to be found anywhere inside or outside of the Plummer building. That's the last thing you'll see. Nope, just griffins and owls. That's what represents the Mayo Clinic, right? Because you see nothing but griffins and owls and all the paperwork from the Mayo Medical Clinic. It's okay. It all comes by email now, so it won't fill your whole desk. Remember, medical bureaucracy. Thank you, Henry Plummer, for giving us medical bureaucracy, our modern medical system. Anyways, this is what I'd expect to see, but nowhere to be seen on the Plummer building. It's seen here. And of course, this building has absolutely nothing to do with medical care. But yeah, that's what you'll get. So just wanted to show you there's a variation of that on these cartouches. And then there's even these older cartouches, much, much older. And looking at them, they do actually appear older. So who knows how old this really is. But when you look closely, you can see some of the fine detailing within this. And once again, who knows what this represents and who knows what original time frame this was from. Or on the other hand, is this remaining object much, much more recent than we realize, and it's just been subjected to some terrifying destructive forces that we can't begin to imagine? All possibilities. Yeah, the way to the third eye. Yeah, maybe. Lord of the Rings is just okay. Now, you're talking about the book or the movie. It doesn't matter. Anyways. So, we're going to transition here. And as we do, please hit that like button. And we're just going to roll right on through it. And what else do we have? Well, we're not close to being done yet. So one other thing I wanted to talk about real quick, I was going to talk about heraldry, but I think we'll wait on that because something tells me that this is a topic you would all like to visit again. Am I right? Is this a topic we'd like to visit again? If you want to visit this topic again, just hit the like button. That's all you have to do. I'll tell you what, if we have 1,000 likes on this live stream, and I don't usually do this, but if we have 1,000 likes on this live stream, then we'll do it again, and we'll do it again soon, and we'll look at more symbols. So go ahead and hit that like button if that's what you really want to see. And if you don't want to see it, that's okay. We'll move on to another topic. Believe me, I've got so many topics lined up, it's not even remotely difficult. So if you want to see this again soon, hit the like button. There you go. Just let Paulie hit it for you. Because believe me, there's a lot of directions we can go with this. There's a lot of things that we can look at with symbols. And we can even compare it with the official history, or we can look at them fresh like we've done tonight. So, anyways. So back to the other symbols of Tartaria. Hit the like button if that's what you want to see, and if not, that's okay. We're going to take a little departure now, and we are going to go to a specific location. And so let me share this with you. We are going to go to the city of Riga in Latvia. Now, all these structures that we're looking at were constructed in the early 1900s. Now, we're going to go through these relatively quickly, but the reason I wanted to feature this is because it's it's considered Art Nouveau. Now, I was going to do an exploration with Old World Exploration probably about a year ago. It seems about that long. And we decided to break from Art Nouveau, but I hadn't really considered this as officially Art Nouveau because it's very unique. But when you look at these structures in Riga, you'll find that there almost seems to be a little bit more of a, how shall we say, mechanical mentality to them. I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing that, but I mean, what do you think? I mean, is this all stonework? How the heck did they do this? And no, I haven't been to Latvia lately. Definitely going to have to get there because this is definitely something I want to interface with. I mean, what is going on here? Very, very advanced structures, very unique symbolism, and something very, very unique. Something that looks like it's classical or Greco-Roman and yet has a more advanced touch to it. Sort of an amalgamation, if you will, of Roman Greco with Art Deco. Therefore, it's Art Nouveau. Or is it actually the pinnacle of building technology of the previous civilization? I mean, what do you think? Sooner West. Yeah, it definitely looks 3D printed. So very, very intriguing. And then you'll have other images like this. And yet, once again, we see the helmeted figure. That comes up a lot. So maybe there is something more with that Mechazoid or biosuit. What was that program from the 1980s? Oh, yeah, Captain Power. Yeah, go watch that one. Only lasted a season. It was a pretty good show. Marketed for kids, but the stories were adult themed. Yeah, so they always say. I mean, you look at some of these. No idea what any of these symbols mean. Why is anybody in Latvia building like this in the early 1900s? Again, when it was really easy. We'll go through these relatively quickly because we've got some more symbols to get through, but these are featured on many, many structures there. I mean, look at this one. Very, very ornate and detailed. 4 faces right there in immediate view. Probably many, many more than we could possibly count on the whole building. Yeah, 3D printed. I don't know how you explain that. And once again, you also have the structures appearing different depending on the light. Oh, and once again, in the early 1900s, we could show the full form. Very interesting, huh? This just shows you this structure. But I have a feeling this is going to be a structure that'll be around for a while. And then what do these figures up here towards the top represent? Very interesting helmets. But it seems a lot more mechanical, doesn't it, than we'd expect to see. Neoclassical cubist, says Polly. Yeah, that's probably about the best way to describe it. Yeah, and you're right. They do look angry. They do look like there's some suffering or something going on here. It's really hard to say. Yeah, and everybody's yelling. So I don't know. I mean, was this a structure that was constructed when things were starting to get bad? Maybe. Were they representing that? That could be. I mean, look at how this protrudes right here. I mean, we see this, but then there's detailing on the bottom of it. These figures don't appear to be in agony. Yeah, it's just how did they do that? 3D printed? There's even older structures. They appear older, but then they've got the same components on them. Very, very unique. So yes, Riga is definitely moving up on the on-site exploration list, I have to admit. And even the interiors. I mean, look at this. Of course, we have the spiral staircase, the staircase that goes all the way to the top. Why doesn't anybody build like this now? Well, because spiral staircases are silly. It's not efficient. We just don't have the money. Well, if you're in the United States, you can blow a couple $1 trillion on indecisive conflicts in the Middle East, but by golly, we don't have the money to do this. It's just a waste of money. Okay, you say so. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there's so many wow factors when you look at all these. Yeah, very mechanical looking. Pharaoh, would the regular peasants walking around even look up to appreciate and honor? Probably not. Why would anybody do it today? Anyways, this is a pretty impressive one because I mean, just the sheer number of figures that they got on this one is unbelievable. But then, of course, you see these signs that they put at street level. Yeah, the signs look very modern, don't they? But then when you go up the building, yeah, it gets a little bit more advanced, a little bit more impressive. And again, what do these symbols represent? I get the feeling that I could probably spend weeks or even months in this city and not even come close to seeing everything. Just one city. And yet we've seen this kind of structure before, like the Polk County Courthouse in Des Moines. Now, maybe this was added later. That feels like an addition right there. But what do all these faces represent? A lot of symbolism here, and it looks like we got a variation of the cartouche right here. Very intriguing. And then this one up here, here's that helmet again. And what are these symbols? Looks like crosses, but double crosses. And here you see the giant faces on either side. This is one of the more well-known structures. And then some sort of figure in agony. I don't know. Very, very intriguing. Adam, if humanity put equal amount of energy into creating as we do destroying, yeah, I wonder, could we do it? Maybe, maybe not. Just don't know. Anyway, I think that's about all we have on this. I think I've got one more. Oh, yeah. One of the fine detailed images. That's what I saved for last. So, I mean, what have you got going on here? But you still see this same shell right here on what looks to be an almost mechanoid face. I mean, I don't even know what you call this. This is just so strange. It's strange, it's beautiful, and it's frightening all at the same time. I don't even know how I could describe it. But I very much want to interact and see what this construction material is like in person. Because is it's really representing the ultimate pinnacle of the previous civilization? And were they actually sensing, seeing, understanding that things were about to get really bad and they reflected it in their structures? And that's why we have those figures in agony. Don't know. But there are symbols and there are overlaps in places where there shouldn't be. Yeah, Jamie, Cybertronian. I would say so. Yeah, I don't know, William. 3D printed or maybe even something more advanced than that. 3D printed with some sort of liquid polymer. Yeah, I mean, we just don't know. It's just amazing that it's still standing. Okay, so let us take a look. We're going to look at a theater here. And we're actually going to go to Los Angeles, and we're going to look at Pantanges Theater, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. 1930. And this theater still stands to this day. And I did feature some theaters in last year's exploration. And I'd like to give a shout out to Paulie. He's the one who contributed these images. So thank you very much, Paulie. Yeah, of course, we're going to take a look at these. And from 1930, so it was contemporaneous with the Plummer Building, at least if we go off the official history. This is a theater in Los Angeles. And yet, when you look closely at this in this theater, you'll find that there's a lot of figures that don't seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, again, 1930, what the heck is this supposed to represent? I mean, maybe this individual here is wearing a suit, but what about the rest of these figures? What does this represent? It just seems to be out in left field, or right field, or off the stadium entirely for any sort of analogy. But again, you do see a more advanced version of that cartouche. You do see the same symbols. They just seem to have been evolved a little bit. And so maybe it gives the impression that this structure is from that same civilization. Not telling you to leap to that conclusion, but we have those hints, don't we? Like 1700, no doubt. Well, of course, Polly, it was built in 1 year. Just like the Plummer Building, they threw that up in a year. Come on, this was the 1920s, 1930s. Things could get done. No problem. I don't think it's a pipe organ, but it does look like one, doesn't it? It does look like one. Let's look at some more. Here's the old black and white image. And again, you've got these figures. Once again, there's that same helmet, though. They're holding shields. Just so much beauty and ornate detail. I mean, right here on the side in these columns and these pillars. Who has the time to do this in 1930? Well, apparently somebody did. If it really was 1930. And by the way, you can still go visit this to this day. They actually filmed a scene from Batman Forever. Yeah, you know, if you could look past all the neon lighting. There's that cartouche again. Some figures sitting up here, but just so many things that don't seem to add up. A lot of detail in this structure. Now, on the ceiling, the only other place I've seen a ceiling that's close to this, that looks this advanced, is actually in the Iowa State Capitol at the top of the rotunda, where they have the lights in the middle of it. Outside of that, doesn't seem to be common, but maybe the best way to say it is there's not many surviving examples left. And then even here, you know, you have this centerpiece right here and then a cartouche on either side. So what kind of material is this made out of? No idea. Yeah, that's right, Albie. Val Kilmer as Batman. He was pretty good as Batman. He just didn't exactly have the best. Never mind. It was okay. We'll leave it at that. What's this right here from William? If I was a billionaire, my super suit would have. Okay. Villain, until this episode, I always thought cartouche was a color. Maybe. I mean, you know, it just seems to be a name that we associate with something. Remember how we associate names with things. You're seeing a fine example of it here. Now look at this figure. This is very gorgeous. For some reason, this is almost making me think of the film Metropolis, and I'm not sure why. But again, seeing the same symbols and everything there, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? Very, very unique. And I'm really not even sure what to make of it, to be honest with you. But that's why I figured I had to share this with you. Now, when Paulie emailed me, he wondered if this plane figure was added later, but who knows? Maybe it was always part of it. And maybe they were just reflecting to when they actually discovered flight. You know, who knows for sure? Oh, yeah. Follow the Piper. No doubt about it. Vaughn, the cartouche may represent the reflection we perceive as our own reality. Could be a lot of truth in that. Could be a lot of truth in that. Yeah, it is a very beautiful style, isn't it? And again, it almost feels like it's the pinnacle of what they had come to. But again, who knows for sure? You know, and you can see this kind of detailing within the rest of these figures. So anyway, that's the Pantages Theater in Los Angeles. It's still standing, so something else you can visit and interface with. And thank you for the share, Polly. And we'll look at one other thing here real quick. And I'd like to thank Cubist for these shares. And Cubist got us some images from Scotland, I do believe. I am Cubist. And again, you see another variation of this cartouche. And Scotland's filled with very interesting architecture, beyond any shadow of a doubt. This is a carpet factory. Kind of reminds me of that tire factory in California that looks like it's from something we think of as Babylon or, you know, Sumeria. Yeah, carpet factory. What do you think? Good one. And then this image here that's from a cemetery and seems to be depicting all kinds of things. You even see an old world structure collapsing over here, some divine figure. But again, even though this seems to be a much older structure, the same symbols at a different time. Atom bomb. Divine structures and symbols we may never understand. Perhaps not. But we can get a good idea, can't we? Oh, there was a good comment. Cheryl. And no mistakes. Yeah, never any mistakes when they constructed these, was there? Yeah, Saxon. I mean, it may be very, very frightening. You do see that in a lot of these images. I'll acknowledge that. So who knows what we're really looking at? Yeah, or you know, maybe 1929 in a couple months. I don't know. I didn't look into that carpet factory, so just sharing the images. All right, a little something different there. And do I have anything else? Okay, so to close this particular exploration, I just wanted to show you this. So we've looked at all these structures, and we've seen all these impressive images and these reliefs that are actually part of the structures. But what exactly do we use to represent nations, states, and everything else? Oh, right. We use these really cool cloth flags. It's the 21st century, it's the 2000s, and every nation in the land has its own flag. It's a cloth flag. Why are we not building really impressive symbols and structures anymore? Anybody have any ideas? Hey, Newers, well, that's okay. Thanks for joining us when you did. It's just very intriguing to me. It's very intriguing that we use flags now. When on structures, you can see this. I mean, why don't we have a flag that's something like this? I mean, look at all these symbols here. Again, in this modified cartouche device. Why aren't we building this everywhere? Who needs a flag? You just build these symbols in your buildings. Well, apparently we can't. So, you know, put up your flag. You apparently also used to be able to build really nice lion reliefs, if it was actually a lion. And I don't know, maybe an owl, maybe something else. It's just an interesting thing to think about. Think about these symbols that they were actually building in buildings. And this was in the past, when it was supposed to be harder, but apparently it was easier. But now, you want to represent a nation, a state, anything? Use a flag. You know, of course, a cloth flag, like this. Although, oddly enough, when you look at these older images of cloth flags, you'll notice that there were more of the symbols that were on the cloth flags. But was that to repurpose the symbols? Was that to give us something else? Or was that just to tell us something else? So then years later, they could say, you're a fool for even questioning this. Don't question it. Just believe what we tell you. And never mind any inconsistencies. Oh, yeah. I like this one. United States flag with the star on it. That's original. Now look at that. Mexico got their eagle with the snake. But when you look at these flags and you look at the evolution of the flags, you get an idea of how the symbols have changed and what's really happened. I love Double Dragon. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, you're right, William. And that's where you really see the connection. Nah, that's okay, RB. I don't think I would ever want a flag, you know. Maybe if we had the means to do it, maybe just a nice little symbol somewhere. That's okay. I don't need a symbol. I don't need a flag. I don't need anything. So, ah, there's meanings, but can the meanings be changed? That's always the question we need to talk about. Hmm. Yes, indeed. And yet you can, as you go back in time, you can find, or at least what we're told or what we think of as time, you know, if time really exists, that's another discussion, but we can find the original heraldry, the original orders of England, such as the Order of Bath. I do believe Nelson was in the Order of Bath, memory serves. The only one that was conferred on him by England because of his shocking affair with Lady Hamilton. Yeah, Nelson's an interesting character. But you think about this, you can actually see this evolution officially from symbols, heralds, coats of arms that were once on buildings to flags. And that seems to be how symbols have evolved. Sissy May. Meanings change according to who tells what the symbols mean. Ah, absolutely. And that is probably a great way to end this particular exploration. So, like I said, if there is a very positive response to this exploration, we'll go back to it relatively soon. And I did receive a lot of contributions from members with other symbols, and I'll look at them and get back to you. And if you want an immediate response, let me know. And if you want to wait, and we do get a chance to do this again relatively soon, we'll look at them then. But as always, I leave it up to you. And I hope you enjoyed this exploration. And it's good to be back. I know it took a whole week off. It's a long time, especially for this channel's time frame. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed. And I hope you all have a great week. And thank you for bearing with me with the initial difficulties. Usually I prefer a standard of quality, but sometimes there's things beyond my control. But if I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm going to be somewhere. Let's see if we can find an AI that'll do that for you. Anyways, well, thank you all for joining me wherever you are in the land. And I hope you have a great week. And we've got another full schedule of explorations. And we'll be back next weekend for another live stream. So this is Lucius Aurelian. Please hit that like button before you depart. Signing off, and we will see you next week. Thank you for joining me.